All right, peace to the family out there. This is Brother Sankofa. We are here live again on Baba TV, which you know is always fire every time. And we got a special treat for the family out there, right? We are at the residence, or the former residence, excuse me, of no other than the great ancestor, Malcolm X El Hajj Malik Shabazz, right here on 72 Dale Street in the Roxbury section of Boston, Massachusetts, a place that he lived at a very young age with his sister Ella Collins, his half-sister, who was her a mentor, a guide, and even a teacher to Malcolm X, who was a very strong pillar in the community, a great activist, and a very intelligent, beautiful black woman herself. This is the residence in which these two beautiful spirits once presided, all right? They are ancestors now, but this is now a historic landmark, and we just wanted to bring it to the people live right here on Baba TV. Now, we was here before in another episode a couple of years back. We covered down, and it was freezing out there, if you remember. And y'all go in the archives and check it out on the Boston playlist, you know what I mean, on Baba TV. But right now, we're going to go into a little bit of, just the history on the house itself, the things that took place over the years, as far as the people having to fight to keep the house in the community and even to be made a historic landmark, which it is now, as you can see, national historic landmark. You know, it wasn't just always that. You know, there was a time when the city, had no interest in keeping this preserved as a historic landmark. And it took, people on the ground in the community that were advocates of wanting to keep this preserved as a historic landmark, and rightfully so, considering the history that went along with the great man who has made national and international history, Malcolm X. This being a place where he once lived, and so much of his history ties into this house. And not just him, his sister, who was an activist, who, when even after he had made his transition, all right, she continued to do a lot of the work in the community, be a pillar in the community. And also, this home has been visited by some of the greats, elders in the conscious community. You know, I believe this is a home where Professor James Small said he was married in. Right here, Professor James Small, in this home right here on 72 Dale Street, right here in Boston, Massachusetts. You know, this was a haven where a lot of revolutionaries and activists and people in the community, you know, on a grassroots level, came here and met and talked and built. You know what I mean? So this house has a lot of history that is inclusive, right, of Malcolm X, muchly so, but not only exclusive to Malcolm X is what I'm saying, right? But is inclusive of a lot of history, considering just the activism that we're all very familiar with, was involved in and has established a great legacy as a result of, but also his sister, who a lot of times goes undermentioned or hardly mentioned at all right? So definitely, he was here at a time in his life where he was in the streets. If you read the chapter in the autobiography of Malcolm X by Alex Haley, if you read a chapter entitled Homeboy, he talks about, his time in Boston, the type of activities he was caught up in as a youth, being attracted to the allure of the streets, because it was popping like that here in the 1940s, as far as the gambling, the pimping, the bootleg booze, you know what I mean? There's just so much going on that he, coming a man from Lansing, younger man at the time, coming from Michigan, Lansing, Michigan, right, from a boarding school to staying with his sister, who in this neighborhood at that time was known as the Hill area, right? And it was basically a middle-class black community, residential middle-class black community. It was always predominantly African-American, specifically black community, but not too far from here, it wasn't so middle class. It was a lot more a slummy area of Boston, right? Which is not too far from here. Roxbury is only but so big, you know what I mean? Even though it contains a lot of history, the history is a lot bigger than the per square mileage itself. So a couple of blocks away, where it was the Stroh, where a lot of other activities went on, where a lot of the ballrooms that he frequented, and like Wally's Cafe, the Highland Tap, things like that. Well, a lot of things was popping and going on. He was engaging into the street life and was caught up into the allure of what was then the fast life, and that led him into incarceration at a time in his life at a young age, right here in Boston, Massachusetts, right? But where he would turn in every night would be at this house. There's oftentimes I wonder, because there was times where there was some archaeologists, right, Baba, out back digging up. I guess they was trying to find some, archives or things, memorabilia. Obviously, that's what they were looking for if they were digging up to connect to Malcolm X a little bit, give him a little bit broader scope of his younger years in the streets. We know about him as Malcolm X, but there was a time when he was Malcolm Little. There was a time when he was Detroit Red, and there's less history known about him in that time of his life than there is, and obviously so, and rightfully so, that when he became the great, world-renowned and recognized Malcolm X, as a civil rights, human rights, and black nationalist activist, So I'd be wondering, like, wow, man, I wonder if you dig up in there, if you go in there, well, imagine what is in these walls, if these walls could talk sometimes, you know what I mean? Because he was here in a time in his life where he was conscious about the street life. He was caught up into the street life. His sister was always a strong pillar in the community. She was always an activist. She was always, a person in his life that gave him strength, encouragement, and guidance, and she was like that in the house on a domestic capacity, but also like that on a community level, okay? Outside of the home. So, definitely got to salute Ella and definitely recognize and commemorate her for her contributions and so much that she's contributed to continue the legacy of not only her brother Malcolm X, but just the legacy of self-determination and self-improvement, because she was definitely a proponent of that as well, so I want to also salute our elder Ella Collins. Yes, so this home is still standing here. It's in Boston. It's blighted. I don't know what they're doing. You can see it's undergoing some construction and stuff like that. You know what I mean? I'm just trying to imagine what it would look like in a couple of years. As you can see, it's blocked off. But we, decided to go a little bit past the blockade to try to bring it to the people, best we can, because it's important. And as a young black man growing up in Boston myself, and there was a time I didn't even know this was the home of Malcolm X. I would be driving by here, and going by here and not even having a clue what this was or the importance of what it was, So to have acquired a lot of knowledge and admiration for our great ancestor Malcolm X over the years, and knowing that this is his home, and me being inspired by him first and foremost when I was young to enhance and expand my vocabulary after reading his autobiography, right? Just and knowing that, wow, he only lived a mile and a half away from where I grew up at, Dorchester, Roxbury borderline. That was just deep and profound to me. Not only that, I share the same birthday as Malcolm X, May 19th. That was almost prophetic to me. I'm not getting spooky. I don't think I'm no reincarnation of Malcolm X, or I'm trying to fill them shoes or even qualified. However, I can, on a higher level of insight, appreciate those kind of connections because of the same zeal and passion I have for black empowerment and black liberation. And that's something that was in him and instilled him as a youth. Prior to Malcolm X finding the Nation of Islam and finding his enlightenment through that at first, as he was a child, the seed of black nationalism, self-improvement, and self-empowerment was implanted in him because of his father, Mr. Little, was a Garveyite. Was a Garveyite and a Pan-Africanist, which led to a lot of the strife and the issues he had with the local Klansmen and the other white people in the community that they were living in, right? That led to his house being firebombed and eventually his father being assassinated and murdered by the Ku Klux Klan, even though they tried to label it as a suicide. So, after him going to boarding school, the family broke up. His mother went to Kalamazoo, institution in Kalamazoo that deal with people who are emotionally distraught or, mentally distraught. And the family was broke up. Malcolm X went to a boarding school. His brothers and sisters went to other places. And then after that, he ended up right here, with his half-sister in Roxbury section of Boston in about the early 1940s. And when he came here, when you read the autobiography, it's a profound difference from where he was to where he came then, where you see black men walking around the streets with conchs in their hair, you know, up strutting up and down the avenue with white women on their arms, because I guess they were players, they was Macs, they was pimps, you know, that allure of the streets, the storefront churches, the pool halls, you know, the after hours, you know, seeing little kids hanging out late on the corner swearing, you know, seeming like they had no kind of parental guidance or authority figures just controlling them all the time, from the structure that he was used to, coming from where he came from. When he came here to Boston, when he came here to Roxbury, he seen that was what it was like in the streets, and he was attracted to that because it was a difference that he liked. It was something different. And you know, after him going through the hardship that he going through, reformatory schools, seeing the stuff that he went through with his family, you get a taste of that fast life, you probably want in. You know, and you got a coldness and a strength about you because of what you've been through, have developed your mind to become a certain way that you're about that street life, like many of us. And one of the points of me even connecting all those points to the story of Malcolm X and his past and him coming here is for the whole purpose of conveying that we always talk about, and we should and continue to, the greatness of Malcolm X, El-Hajj Malik Shabazz, because he was a contributing factor of so much and one of the most disciplined and determined and realist and intelligent and influential people of his time. So we should always, and he's inspired many people generations after him, so we should always continue to talk about and recognize and commemorate the work and achievements and the contributions of Malcolm X. But however, we also must never forget to realize and also keep in mind that it's also critically important to remember that before he was Malcolm X, he was Malcolm Little. And the reason why I say that, because in the streets, right? Because he was a street dude at one point. And a lot of our brothers and sisters who are in the streets and in this life that has an allure to the streets, that has an attraction to the streets. See, hip-hop didn't even exist in Malcolm X's times. See, it's being promoted. It's being marketed, a certain message that is, anyway, it's being marketed to the youth. So you have a lot of people who are like Malcolm Littles in a way out there in the streets. You don't know that there may be, maybe not a Malcolm X in them, maybe something like a Malcolm X, but a greater version of themselves, a higher level, a higher, more intelligent version of themselves that is within them that can be bought out. You know what I mean? Malcolm X wasn't always just Malcolm X. He wasn't born a revolutionary activist and was shaped, formed, and fashioned to be that. He was, through the experiences and things that he had gone through, the winds of circumstances and situations had buffeted him, changed and molded him into becoming the soldier in our knight in shining armor in which he was. However, there's a lot of brothers out here who are not shaped, and sisters who are not shaped, molded, and fashioned right now to their fullest potential. But see, the whole purpose of this knowledge is to educate, is to break shackles, right? And it's to cause a revolution in the mind, because we need that. There cannot be no realistic or tangible revolution until there's a mental and psychological revolution, and there's a lot of different dichotomies, and there's a lot of different issues and circumstances and psychological issues that are intergenerational that we have to address. All that, we know that. So I'm saying that to say this, there's a lot of young brothers out there who like Malcolm Little, not Malcolm X before he was Malcolm X, are like Malcolm Littles, right? They're in the streets. You don't know who they can become. So we shouldn't just throw our youth away. We shouldn't throw our young brothers and sisters away. We shouldn't just be so ready to always turn our back on them, even though sometimes they may seem too far gone. But when they're at a certain age, no. The battle is for the hearts and the mind, and the whole purpose and functionality of the knowledge is to make the unconscious conscious so they can evolve to greater heights and become a better version of themselves and tap into the greater potential that is our ancestral greatness, that is in our DNA, that is in all of us, and we can tap into that. We should never turn our back on our youth. We should never fail to feel the need to educate our youth where we can, when we have their attention, because the battle is for the hearts and the mind. Hip-hop industry, right, which is not controlled by us but controlled by people who have agendas for us, are responsible for the psychological message that is constantly being proliferated and imbued into a whole generation of children. KRS once said this. He said hip-hop can be used to educate, or hip-hop the music and the message that is can be used to mislead. It can be used to educate or can be used to mislead. The music has been being used and manipulated because it has been co-opted and infiltrated for years purposely to mislead us with a lot of talented, creative, and beautiful and talented brothers and sisters too at that, who is making a lot of money, who is changing their lives and changing a lot of the lives of their loved ones, who is making a lot of money too. But see, slavery is in a different shape, form, and fashion today. It's a psychological plantation that we're on. And this plantation is constantly planting and breeding new seeds every day, planting new seeds every day in the psychology and the minds of these young Malcolm Littles out here, or potential ones. All of us have great potential in us, but a lot of times the youth have been turned there from the conscious and woke community at a certain time. You know what I mean? Where there's not that interaction and connection with them. You know what I'm saying? See, Malcolm X was around. When he was around, there wasn't no crack era then. He wasn't hip hop. He didn't see a lot of the stuff that we see then. So a Malcolm Little in this time, I understand, would be a lot more harder and rough around the edges than a Malcolm Little of that time. Well, the only thing that means is this: we would have to go that much harder to wake up the youth. We would have to go that much harder to be those pillars and the OGs, not misleading the youth, but trying to educate them. Don't, you know what I'm saying, build with them. You know what I'm saying, build them up. You know what I mean? Because we know that the greater the opposition is there, and the battle is for the hearts and the mind, right? So the only way you could be a real OG, a real leader, a real teacher, a real person who's a revolutionary-minded scholar in this knowledge, and you're woke and all this stuff that we proclaim, is when you see the youth out there, which is our greatest resource. That's right, the youth was our greatest resource. That's why they try to take them from us young. That's why they try to get their minds young. And that's why a lot of leaders like Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, and a lot of other revolutionary, like New Testament Dr. Martin Luther King, a lot of people, they get cut off young. And when I mean young, 39, when he was murdered at the age of 39, that was not old. That was not old. I'm 46, 47, you know? And I'm like, damn, time flies. If he died at 39, and as the saying goes, a lot of people start to begin to live, really understand what I mean by live, understand and apply certain wisdom to life and grow at a certain level. When they start to do that and take on that stage in life, right? Because life is a journey, not a destination. Usually they start to realize, wow, I just started living at the age of 40, 45. I'm really starting to understand life, grasp it, and I'm evolving in a different direction. See, they wanted to stop a brother like him who was radical, who was from the streets, who made a change, and it was an example to other people from the streets of the change they could make, or greater. And not only that, he was evolving in his consciousness. You had to cut him short because that is an example or a template that they don't want duplicated. So they had to destroy that, right? And make sure that they create a factory that creates the opposition or the antithesis to that. Something that would be anti or counter-revolutionary, counterproductive, counter long-term self-improvement or empowerment for the people. And that's why the message and the music has to be controlled the way that it is. So it's just up to us not to preach to the youth or to try to badger them, you know, air ourselves, you know, but it's about, you know, understanding that some of our greatest leaders are, and potential greatest leaders and heroes and sheroes, are right now walking around without elegant titles, without elegant names. They don't have a book written on about them. They're not on YouTube yet. They don't even have a voice yet. But a lot of the changes that we're looking forward to come, right, or that we're hoping for to come, or that we're planting seeds, because we, you know, we got to plant this seed of knowledge in this time space continuum called life, and eventually it's going to produce other greatness. We know that that greatness to come is within the youth. They are our greatest resource. That's why they are the greatest target of the opposition, and that's why they have to become more so of the greater target, right, for improvement and change and focus and attention from us, especially those who are proponents of the so-called woke or conscious community or network. It's very incumbent and it's very important that we don't just glorify the story of Malcolm X and the greatness of the legacy that he left, because that is sensationalism, right? And he definitely deserves all the accolades and the great love and adoration he gets once again. But we also should extrapolate and take from the story of Malcolm X too, that before he was Malcolm X, he represented what a lot of young brothers and sisters out here are, right? Products of the social American order, right? Born into a certain kind of social, political, economic paradigm, that breeds a certain kind of limitation of a value on life or economic privilege or equality, and it develops a certain kind of path that most people go down. So to see a brother come out of that to become as great as he was is only representative of the greatness that is within many of us, like he had it in him. And we always got to consider that. Not Malcolm X. We don't just want to glorify a person when they made it. We got to see the greatness in our youth and give them the glory and the benefit of the doubt and the attention and the love and the knowledge, because the battle is for the hearts and minds of our youths. And like there's a lot of Malcolm Littles out there, once again, who are just waiting to evolve into their greatest potential, all right, and their greatest self. So with that note, I just wanted to build on that as we came here to this home, to this landmark, which I'm proud to say I live in a city that is where this is dwelling at, where this sits, you know, and all its glory and majesty and history attached to it, you know. And I want to thank Baba for coming through Boston and once again, and, you know, bringing this stuff out to the people, to the world, because there's a lot of things and there's a lot of gems and there's a lot of history in Boston that goes unrecognized or under-recognized or noticed. I mean, and there's so much to cover, you know, that we only hit the tip of the iceberg with a lot of the things that we do bring out. But, you know, Baba's coming here more, and there's going to be a lot more coverage of a lot of things, and we're going to bring on a lot more teachers and scholars and representatives to you from other schools of thoughts, different activists, people doing different things in the community, because we got all of that, and a pretty vast conscious community in the city of Boston as well, right? And it's all about networking. It's all about having this knowledge, not just for having knowledge's sake, right? But having this knowledge so we can become empowered, right? And we can become, proactive with it. We can become less theoretical, or not only theoretical, but also practical. You know what I mean? Because that's how change and transition is manifested, through real action and tangible changes, all right? So until next time, all right? Stay in tune. Make sure you press like and you subscribe to Baba TV, which you know is fire every time. Peace, love, and light. We out.